Streetlight Investment Act. It's H7366, sponsored by Representative Ruggiero. Welcome, Representative Ruggiero.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee, for hearing this bill tonight. As many of you know, we did pass the Streetlights Municipal Law in 2013, and I thank you for your support and vote on that. That allows municipalities to buy their streetlights from National Grid if it's financially viable for a city or town. It's enabling legislation. 26 cities and towns are in the process of buying their streetlights, including Providence, and you'll hear some testimony and perhaps have a letter as well on how the capital city will save $24 million over the next 10 years. So what we've learned since the passage of this law and why this bill is before you is that there are about 1,000 public streetlights that are paid by non-municipalities, fire districts, even regional schools. Exeter, West Greenwich, and Charahoe pay National Grid to maintain their streetlights, but they can't buy them because this law specifies municipalities. The other issue is if a city or town enters into an agreement with Grid to purchase the lights, the Grid purchase and sale says the lights must be used for the sole purpose of lights and nothing else. Now, technology has also changed in 3 years. These street lights can do so much more. For example, if a city has a high crime area, they can put a camera in the on the light for public safety. So the bill before you does two things. It allows street light customers, which you see throughout the bill, not just a municipality, to buy and own street lights so they can put the LED bulbs in to save on energy costs. And the second is on page 3, line 13. It changes the words sole purpose to primary purpose of buying a street light as lighting, so this doesn't impede any future access. So those are the two changes on this bill, which we did pass in 2013, so I thank you for listening to it, and I'm sure you'll hear testimony from cities and towns, and people support it, and I believe National Grid is here not supporting it, but that's fine. I thank you. And if there are any questions.
Any questions for the sponsor? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Rep. Giro. I arrived late. Who owns the poles?
National Grid.
So this would be a purchase of the pole?
This is a purchase of the actual street light. And that's what municipalities are able to do from the 2013 legislation that we passed. What happened since then is that we discovered that there are about 1,000 streetlights that are not owned by a municipality. They're owned by a fire district or, in the case of actually a regional school district. So those 1,000 lights they are not able to buy because they're not a municipality. So this bill allows the streetlight customer, not just a city or town, to purchase it. And as I said, it goes beyond just saying it has to be the sole purpose to a primary purpose of using it for lighting in case there are other things that a city may want to do. For example, put a camera or, for safety reasons.
No, I remember the bill. I'm just, so they purchase a piece of the pole.
Yeah, actually, Jeff Broadhead is here from PRISM, which is a consortium of the cities and towns who can get into the nitty-gritty on what they buy. They buy the street light and not the pole. I believe Grid has that. Grid still gets, their money for the rent and for obviously providing the electricity. But the city or town can choose, if they do diligence and decide it's worthwhile to own it, they may say it's not worth it. We'd rather just continue to pay Grid for the street light and the pole and the electricity. It depends. That's up to every individual community, to do their own due diligence on that. That's why it's enabling legislation.
Okay,
and some cities or towns are doing it, and as I mentioned, 26 right now are in the process of looking at it. And I think the most recent was probably Providence, and they are in the process of buying street lights, and they probably have specific numbers as to how many lights. I know that they'll save about $24 million over 10 years, but they can probably, dig down into the specifics.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Any further questions of the sponsor? Yes.
Thank you, Representative. If something goes wrong with the light, who's responsible to get up there and fix it?
My understanding is there are obviously trained, licensed electricians, and I think Jeff is probably going to talk next about the specifics of how that goes, who does that work. Obviously, I'm the sponsor of the bill. I don't get up in a bucket truck and change your light bulbs.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering, would you need National Grid's permission to go up their pole? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I think they'll talk to you and tell you that they think that they should be the only ones to do that. So,
okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Any more questions of the sponsor? Thank you, Rep.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Since Representative Amori had a question that appears as though, according to the sponsor's testimony, that Jeff Broadhead might be able to answer. Jeff, would you come forward?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
For the record, my name is Jeff Broadhead. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington County Regional Planning Council and also of PRISM, which is a statewide partnership for Rhode Island Streetlights Management. We worked closely with Rep. Ruggiero in developing the bill in 2013, and we have been working to implement it ever since. Would you like me to do my testimony now or simply answer more on those specific questions and then do my testimony when I'm more in order? Is that?
Sure.
My testimony now?
Yeah,
okay.
please.
Okay. This bill has three main impacts, and several people will. It's only addressing a few minor changes to the bill. The original bill allows a municipality to purchase their streetlights, to operate them. It sets guidelines, and in answer to your question, Rep, is that the bill itself says they have to be qualified electrical workers. That's the language that National Grid uses, that the industry uses. The contractor that PRISM has contracted with is made up of licensed electricians, and they are also qualified electrical workers. And there is a standard, OSHA standard. I don't memorize all of those numbers, but these people are fully qualified to be up on the poles according to National Grid's own standards. We don't have to have National Grid's permission. I mean, once the town owns the lights, the town can come in and take care of their own lights, and we would do that as their contractor. What this bill addresses is only three minor issues within the bill. One is, what is the use of the light? There's an artificial or an arbitrary limitation that National Grid has imposed in the documents that's not in the original bill. So we're asking you to change it so that a community can buy their lights for what's called the primary purpose of lighting. That allows Central Falls, for example, one of our members, to put a security camera over that links to the streetlight on the parks where they have a major heroin problem. It allows Providence to continue with the 500 police repeaters that they have mounted on the streetlights. So the use is an important issue. It also, the bill also controls who can be, as Rep. Ruggiero mentioned, several fire districts and several public school districts use tax dollars to pay for streetlights on public roads. This extends the benefits of the bill to them. And finally, the bill requires that when a town purchases their lights, that they can get the warranties, if there are any existing warranties on the equipment. Providence is going to pay $2.7 million. It should get the warranties or any easements that exist. Some of the poles were put up in 1903. They're not going to have easements for them, but the new ones will. So that's what the bill does. But I'd like to stress that it's not a safety issue. The safety concerns were taken care of in the original bill. They are being carried out. It's in all of the documents relating to these, and so I'm not sure what you'll hear tonight, but since I'm speaking early, I wanted to address that issue briefly.
Yes, I guess my issue is that the light is on the pole. The pole is the property of National Grid.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I mean, I was teaching eminent domain in civics today, so I'm thinking about if this is the property of National Grid, how can it be purchased, or how can we allow the purchase?
Okay. There's a very simple rule to that. The original law, and this is not changing, but the original law says that a town can buy their lighting equipment for the original cost less depreciation. So they pay the fair value for it. Now, in most cases, Rep. Ruggiero is correct, and it is the pole itself is a joint use pole. It's got electrical wires at the top, the distribution system, it's got cable, and it's got a little arm with a street light on it. All right, and in that case, the municipality buys the arm, the street light, and just the wire that goes up and connects to the secondary system, but they do not buy any of the distribution system or the pole. The exceptions to that are a few freestanding poles that are only for street lighting purposes. You'll see them in downtown Providence. You'll see an aluminum pole that's only a street light pole with underground wiring. In that case, the city is buying those poles and the underground wiring. It'll have to work with grid to work on the wiring because they're in conduits that's mixed with the electrical distribution. So it's a close relationship on the working side. But for the most part, the towns only buy the light and the mast arm that's on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Pinch hitting. Kristen Dart, City of Providence. We are in full support of this amendment. We have already purchased the lighting from National Grid. The two pieces that we're concerned with is the change from sole purpose to primary purpose, as there are other pieces of equipment that go on to the lighting, including repeaters for our police so that the radio systems work better, the hope of bringing in Wi-Fi throughout the city that could potentially go on the lighting equipment as well. So we are in support of these changes at this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chairman, members of the committee, Office of Energy Resources fully supports the bill. We supported the bill 3 years ago. Our primary focus is on the energy efficiency, energy savings opportunities. As this committee is well aware, street lighting is one of the biggest annual bills for a municipality. So we certainly applaud the City of Providence and other municipalities taking advantage of this law that you passed 3 years ago. But fundamentally, we look at this from a fairness standpoint. Fire districts want to take advantage of this law as well. They should have that right to. So we fully support broadening the definition to allow entities such as fire districts to explore the options of either pursuing LED lighting upgrades in their districts or an outright purchase of the units.
Any questions of the witness? Thanks.
Thank you.
We have the Chief of the Hopkins Hill Fire Department. Chief, welcome. Come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm sorry.
I had asked you, even though we met a couple weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
Down in Richmond, Hopkins Hill is in Coventry.
Coventry. Yes. That's okay, right? I always have to ask that, but thank you for allowing me to testify today. As Representative Ruggiero said, when the bill was written in 2013, it said municipalities and left out fire districts. So I guess we're one of the ones that we own 270 street lights of that 1,000 that she's talking about. So by adding street light customers, it's going to allow us to buy the street lights. Right now, the fire district pays about $34,000 a year to light those lights. If we buy the lights and convert them over to LED, our bill will go down to $8,000, savings of almost $25,000 that can be used in either taxpayer relief or elsewhere within the budget instead of having a tax increase. So I ask you to support the bill. It's a good bill, and it'll allow us, like the City of Providence and others, to save some money for our constituents.
Any questions of the Chief? Thank you, Chief. Next is Dan Beardsley from the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns. I don't see Dan here right now, so we'll move on to Frank McMahon from National Grid. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. National Grid is in opposition to this piece of legislation. You have before you a letter that goes into much more extensive detail of outlining our objections, and after a 7-hour session yesterday, I won't bore you with most of it, but our concerns and our objections are really, our major concerns and objections are really twofold. First and foremost, we've got major concerns about safety. National Grid personnel, you'll hear from them in a minute, are highly trained and professional individuals who understand what serious business it is to be on and around utility poles that are co-owned by National Grid and Verizon. I want to point that out. Half the state's owned by Verizon, the other half of the state is owned by National Grid. Indeed, National Grid, safety is the most important thing. It is job number one, and they take that very seriously. National Grid's concerned that this legislation could lead to tragic circumstances where untrained or undertrained individuals might unintentionally do harm to themselves or others. Second, the original streetlight legislation, which passed 2 years ago, has been mentioned, never intended to reach this far into the work and responsibilities that National Grid takes very seriously. For these reasons and the reasons outlined, the rest of the reasons outlined in the bill, we ask you to reject this version of this bill. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
Yes, Kathy.
Well, Mr. Broadhead was just saying that the bill addresses the use of lights and the primary purpose, and that it does, it says that, I pushed down on my notes, qualified electrical users and licensed electrical workers and OSHA standards. Do you think that anybody would have better knowledge than the electric company? Do you think anybody teaches electrical safety better than National Grid does?
No, I don't. And I think that's the biggest issue that we have. That's the biggest concern that we have. You can, and some of the agreements that we have in place with some of the communities that are interested in talking about it, I think there is always that issue. There are contractors that do work for National Grid that are not part of our workforce directly, but they go through extensive training on the high voltage and the distribution level systems. This isn't like wiring your home, coming in and putting in, service into your house or 100 amp service. It's a much different, much more skilled level of an individual that you're talking about. The level of training and practice and things of that sort are much more necessary, because you only make one mistake in this world, unfortunately, when you're up there, and that mistake could cost you your life. It's a very, very serious situation when people are in those bucket trucks.
And I'll tell you, I know how serious it is, because I don't know how many years ago it was. It's got to be over 10 years ago. Not up on a pole, but I happened to be just over at the Marriott, and I was just coming from a work meeting, and I was talking to one of my coworkers outside, and right by ABC News 6, there was a huge explosion, and I saw a body come flying out by one of those big green electrical compressor, whatever you'd call that piece of transformer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And myself and my coworker ran across, another National Grid person came running over, and to see that person on the ground in the condition he was in, I'll never forget it. So to me, this is very, very serious. When you're letting other people touch these types of wires, and that's a professional that had an issue, I think that we really need to be very cautious about this, because I've seen it firsthand. And I'll be honest with you, my brother-in-law works for National Grid. I know the training that they go in, and I first thought it might have been him. That was one of the most scary things. But to see it happen, and then talking to him about the training that they go through, I'm very cautious about anybody going near high-tension wires after seeing it firsthand for myself with that individual. He did not die, but he was a young guy, and he retired soon after that because I think he was disabled after that incident. So it's a very, very serious thing that we're asking to do here. So I just want to make everybody aware of that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. On the merits of the bill, I think there are merits to this bill. But so let's say every municipality and every ownership, fire district, whatever it might be, decides that they're going to go this way. I would imagine that an unintended consequence is you're going to lay people off.
Potentially. I don't know the answer to that question directly. I'm not.
All right. So as I'm thinking, I'm saying if you lay people off and then we have a blizzard, it takes long enough to get things fixed as it is. Even though, excuse me, Rep. Fogarty, I don't mean to insult your brother-in-law, but I think as I'm thinking about this, is that a possibility? I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe the workforce remains the same, but you must have a set workforce that just works on lights or has that as part of their their duties on a daily basis.
Right. I don't know the answer to that question. There is a representative from the union here that may know that answer better than me, but I certainly can inquire internally and get back to you. I don't believe that that's the case. I believe it's there are different divisions within.
I remember this from the hearing a couple of years ago. I think the question was asked, and it stuck with me because it, despite the merits of the bill and the savings that may be accrued by the towns and cities, that's something that might be unintended. I recall that from the hearing a couple of years ago.
I'll look into it for you and get back to you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Mr. McMahon? Yes, Joy.
My understanding is that the workers that would be working on these have the same training and certification.
So essentially, the first. That to me, a question to me?
It's a question, I guess, too.
Looking at me, so I thought I might have something.
Oh, okay. It's confused. I didn't know if you were asking me or you were asking him.
Well, I'm asking whoever can answer that. So the training is, my understanding
right.
is that it's the same training. I guess.
So my understanding is that there are contractors that these entities, cities and towns and others can go to. They receive some training, but they're certainly not on the level of training where the other, certainly of our particular employees, certainly. But then secondarily, there's a second tier of contractors that National Grid retains just for assistance on everyday issues and things of that sort. So our concern is as we're extending this thing out, you're going to lose control over who these people are that are going onto these poles. The last thing you want to have happen is just a regular, ordinary licensed electrician started to climb a pole or use a bucket truck to get to a pole, change a light bulb, and something inadvertently happens. You remember a year or two ago, unfortunately, there was a Verizon employee. These situations happen all the time. It's very, 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 very high voltage up there, and it's very dangerous. So the question remains, do we expand this to the point where we're losing control of the people that are up there fixing and repairing and adding and doing whatever it is that they're doing? There's got to be some control on the safety issues of this particular aspect of this bill.
And the contractor pool so you've got your National Grid people, and then you said you had a contractor pool. Now that contractor pool, are they also people that would be hired by these cities and towns?
Quite possibly. I just don't know who they avail themselves to.
So then I guess it bounces to that same question.
The contractor pool is. Okay, is that better? I still don't hear it coming through. There it is. The contractors are licensed electricians. They're off the Union Hall. They are contractors from Rhode Island. Many of the contractors that we interviewed do work directly for National Grid. That was one of the questions we asked, although it was not the prime criteria. They have to have all of the OSHA qualifications. But I don't believe it's the same as what Grid's line workers are, because Grid works on the primary and secondary system that's at the top of the pole. That's the electric distribution. The streetlight workers work below that. A fuse is installed between the two, so that when our people come out, they can disconnect the fuse and then they can work on the pole, on the light. So there are several, and that was a requirement that National Grid imposed at the Public Utilities Commission, and we went along with it. It's no problem.
And that doesn't get changed in this legislation. That stays.
That's been in place. The PUC approved that and looked at all of those safety considerations.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, Carol. Yes, Carol.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Jeff, PRISM is the name of your nonprofit organization.
That is correct.
Right. Now, do they employ people, electricians, and do they have equipment, or is all of that contracted out privately?
It's all contracted out. I know Rep. Ruggiero wanted to drive the bucket truck, but we couldn't let her do that.
But PRISM itself does not own, like National Grid owns their own trucks and their own bucket trucks
PRISM
and
has
equipment and everything.
PRISM has selected an experienced contractor that's working in more than 100 communities across Massachusetts. On streetlights, much of that in National Grid's service area. It's a highly experienced company.
Mm-hmm. What's the name of the company?
Siemens.
Siemens. And that's who you generally deal with?
That's who we will be dealing with. None of the towns own their lights yet. National Grid still owns all the lights.
So nobody's actually done this yet?
No, the first one, Providence, is closing on the ownership of their lights the first week of March. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, their 17,000 lights will be transferred into maintenance by Siemens.
Okay.
But they're fully qualified. I mean, it's a...
And I know that you presented to South Kingstown Town Council several times when I was there, and I know you said that they would reap substantial savings if they did this. Could you explain just the numbers for me again?
The numbers are really hard to believe, and the criticism that we get is that the numbers are too good. And the Chief Brown told you that in his district, the price is going to, he's paying $34,000 now, it's going to go to $8,000. That's similar to what most towns, South Kingstown alone, with a preliminary estimate, and the numbers we have now are much better than what I presented back then, would save about $80,000 a year. Providence will save more than $2 million a year,
wow,
including more than $3 million in just the rest of this fiscal year. It's a combination of private sector rather than utility effectiveness combined with a nonprofit management and combined with taking away the facility. The original bill took away the facility charge, which is a very high number that because of grid structure they have to charge for these things. That's a number that's been through the Public Utility Commission, through the regulatory process. Nothing wrong with it. It's just higher than a different delivery model, and that's what we're moving to, is a more efficient delivery model for the taxpayers.
And have you approached Narragansett yet?
I've spoken with Narragansett. They put out part of their work for a bid, and we bid on it, and our bid was for that particular piece of work, which is prior to the lights. Our bid was $60,000. That's the nonprofit. The next bidder was $99,000, and the only other bidder was $160,000. So PRISM is very cost effective for the towns. It got delayed with the unfortunate death of the town manager, so
yes,
we're not sure when they're going to pick up speed again.
Of course. And as far as the safety issues that National Grid is alluding to, you don't see that as an issue?
We would never put anybody in a bucket truck that's not a fully insulated truck and that is not meeting all of the requirements that National Grid puts out themselves. They're the ones that gave us the OSHA requirements and all of that. It's in the contract between us and our contractor. It's in the contract between us and the towns. Everything we can do to protect that, we are doing.
And our issue's not with PRISM. So if every company acts like PRISM,
right,
we'll probably be okay. But what if?
Right. So are there more companies besides PRISM that are getting into this business? Is that what you're suggesting?
PRISM is currently working with 26 communities across the state. There are only 37 that could potentially do this, and those are not all signed up for actual purchase yet, but they're the ones for which we're doing the studies, or of which are already signed up for purchase.
But are there other nonprofits other than PRISM?
No other nonprofits. There are several for-profit companies that have been competing with PRISM.
Amresco. There's a couple others.
There's a couple. Yeah. And whenever a town that I'm knowledge has been given a price, our price is better. But it's not entirely a price issue. You have to be confident.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Yes, Representative Barrows.
Now, you don't have any issue with the cities and towns buying the lights, correct?
Correct.
I think the main concern is the safety.
Correct.
And as you said, if these folks, if all the other folks behave as PRISM will, you wouldn't have any real issue with it.
Right. So National Grid does not have any opposition to the cities and towns buying their lights. We have opinions about what they're going to find once they actually get into this business, but that's neither here nor there. Be more than happy to be careful what you wish for. But nonetheless, our issues really relate to safety. And I can take Jeff at his word and what they're doing. It sounds to me like they're approaching it the right way from a safety perspective. But the legislation just further adds to the number of customers out there. And I don't know his business model. I don't know how many of the 26 communities he's doing feasibility studies for, how many he'll advise to get into and actually buy lights, things of that sort. So he can answer those questions better than I. The issue really is about maintaining safety, and that's what we're concerned about, Rep.
Any further questions of others? Yes, Representative Fogarty.
Can you just tell me the difference from where they'll be working on the pole to the primary wire?
Difference in height?
Yeah.
would be
I'm trying to
guessing.
guess.
So I don't know the exact numbers, but it's roughly 4 feet. Maybe Walt might know specifically, but if not, we could get that answer to you.
Just wondering, like on a windy day in a bucket truck, I mean, I bought bucket trucks for towns before for my town, and, I've seen them up and about. That's a concern. That's why I really kind of want to know the difference. I'm really just concerned about safety, of people that you put up there. And I think that's because for any town, they could save whatever amount of money, and that's a good thing, and I'm not against that at all. But I'm just concerned about the safety only because of what I witnessed. And then also what it would cost a town if somebody died. I mean, the amount of, we're talking a high voltage wire. I mean, until you see, you've seen it in action. I mean, I saw it. So it's something that's just ingrained in me, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. And it's just such a scary thing that I just want everybody to be very.
You only make one mistake.
Right.
That's the unfortunate part about that job.
And that gentleman did. And to see him on the ground smoking like that was just awful. So that's why I'm just very concerned about the safety and the distance. And I just want everybody to be aware that there is a huge variable that could come into play here. So that's why I want to know the distance. And then just a quick question, too, from Mr. Broadhead. So you were on the Washington County Planning, and so this PRISM became part of it, so now you're both the executive director of both of them, so you've kind of branched out here.
Well, after the legislation passed, we realized that the most effective business model was to do it statewide. Our intention was always, during the development of legislation, to provide these services at least across southern Rhode Island, and then other towns asked us about it. And then when we started running numbers, we realized it made more sense to do it statewide because the large communities provide the economy of scale of the purchase of the equipment, not so much on the maintenance, but on the equipment, so that we get far better prices on the bulbs, on the mast arms, and all of that with our the bids we recently put out were for 38,000 lights. We have 65,000 under various stages of contract. Okay. It's a lot of light. It's a lot of the state. It's more than half the state.
So, like from the Washington County Regional Planning, when each town paid like money to be on part of the Washington County, is that what happens with the PRISM part of it too?
Well, they're not all part of it yet, but we chose this model based. It's modeled very much after the League of Cities and Towns REAP program, where they purchase energy for the towns. That's a program of the League. Rather than set up an entire new nonprofit corporation, we put it under the 501c3 status that the Planning Council has. But that's the only reason for it. I mean,
I'm feeling a little outgunned here.
No. I know. You should feel the love. No, what I'm going to say, if I may, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I hear the concern for the safety issue. I really hear, and your experience is riveting, and it will be with you for a long time for sure. I'm happy to put an amendment in, if it helps National Grid, where we can specify what the safety requirement should be, even though it's in their contract with PRISM, and it's already in writing. I'm happy to put it in writing in a bill. If that makes people feel more comfortable and that makes National Grid feel more comfortable with this bill, I'm happy to do that.
It's in the original bill, though.
It is in the original bill, but if people want it in this bill, I'm happy to put it in the bill. So you didn't have my testimony, I guess, back then. So right. That's why it's all in the original bill with all of the OSHA standards and what's required. And as a matter of fact, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Mike Daly, has consistently written a letter of support because it puts a lot of their workers who are out of work back on the jobs. I didn't get a letter from him this time, but I certainly can. But just so you know, that, but I'm happy to do a sub-A if there are concerns, and we can put everything from the original bill in this legislation. I just didn't want to overload it with all of that since it's already law. Thank you.
Any further questions of either of the witnesses? Yes, Carol.
Frank, is it Frank? Now, National Grid owns the wires that are going across the poles, obviously, and
just the electric wires.
Electric wires, and then there's probably Verizon and Cox Cable and God knows what else is up there, right? But we're just talking about streetlights. We're not talking about messing with any of the maiden wires or anything that are
streetlights.
Okay, thank you. So that would limit some of the safety issues that I think we might be concerned with, which you guys are usually up there. Like, I think the question came up about a snowstorm. Would that hurt the situation? You're still going to be reconnecting the electrical wires and figuring out what branch went down and
Correct.
Where it broke.
Right.
So they wouldn't be interfering with any of that work.
No.
Right. Okay. I just think we were getting onto something that might, you know, when you hear about snowstorms, you guys have that locked up. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next witness, I believe it's our last witness, is Walt Trombley. Walt, would you come forward from Local 310?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Walt Trombley. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of Local 310 BUW Council, and I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to speak against H7366. Local 310 is opposed to H7366 for many of the same reasons that National Grid and its representatives just spoke to, but from a different point of view. While Mike Ryan, the engineers, and the drafters of this bill might see the work performed on an energized pole or in a manhole as occurring in a vacuum, where all of the elements are controllable, myself and the union stand against this bill as a practical matter. That the bill places the safety of my members and the public at risk. By granting the customer the right to install the lighting and other equipment on that portion of the pole that is used primarily for the mounting of lighting equipment, the bill does not take into consideration the fact that there are many different situations where the spot that is primarily used for lighting is impractical or dangerous, especially in the city, intersections, and industrial areas that might have multiple types of distribution feeders and voltages on the poles. And if that was not enough, the bill gives the customer the decision-making authority about what type of equipment they're going to place there. Providing that these decisions are made at the customer's discretion, it doesn't make any sense. The main purpose of these poles are to transmit and distribute electricity, not street lighting. To give the customer of streetlights the authority to determine what type of equipment may be placed in an area used for the transmission and distribution of electricity flies in the face of logic. Secondly, the bill does not adequately address safe work practices. It merely states that a contract entered into by the customer must require appropriate levels of training and certification without anything else. In one sentence, the law has determined that the customer, simply because he is contracting out work, has the knowledge to determine the proper qualifications for work on an energized pole that have taken this union and National Grid and its predecessors more than 80 years to establish. Installing and maintaining streetlights on an energized pole in traffic is not the same as working on a light in a parking lot. It requires a different set of skills and equipment. Currently, work performed or directed by any crew or individual sent to repair or install a streetlight is done by someone who has at least 5 years of training as an apprentice lineman and more than 2 years of additional experience as a first-class lineman. Nothing within the law allowing municipalities to take over the street lighting establishes qualifications similar to that. In addition, all the bucket trucks and personal protections are regularly rated and tested for high voltage work. This does not even take into consideration the fact that with the Providence planning on taking over all the streetlights based on this law, that there are additional concerns involving all of the underground services that feed many of the city's streetlights. Everything from a different type of secondary service on the network to gas leaks, lead, asbestos, confined spaces, and other hazards. The point is that you can't be certain of anything that happens when you go up into a bucket truck or into a manhole. You must be prepared at all times to face problems you didn't anticipate and to act accordingly. Unfortunately, the last two persons to be killed while working on and near an energized pole were not linemen for National Grid, but linemen for Verizon, whose wires are set much lower than the area where streetlights are on a pole. The author of this bill has failed to take into consideration all the things that can happen on an energized pole. And if something were to happen, it's my members who will have to risk their safety to correct the problem. And that doesn't even consider the fact that Providence has proposed, in their taking over the streetlights from Grid, that the underground manholes and handholds used to connect most of the lights downtown require additional skill sets involving confined spaces, entry, gases, explosions. I think there was a repeat in that. For more than 80 years, this local has negotiated over the terms and conditions of employment, including safety and work with National Grid and its predecessors. In all those years, no one has performed work on that area of the pole controlled by the company who wasn't a member of this union or at worst a contractor under the control of National Grid. Let me be clear. The bill may specify the area that is primarily for the mounting of streetlight equipment, but a pole cannot be broken up as easily as that. Sometimes it may even involve a switching device used to control and operate on the distribution network, which changes some of the spacings between the wires. And sometimes, because of the lack of room on a pole or the area, the light might be located a lot closer to the primary than usual. In essence, anything above the telephone wires is the work zone that our members must be concerned with. Before this hearing, the House and Senate just passed the governor's toll bill. In the time leading up to the votes, it was repeatedly said that the first things businesses look at when relocating is the state's infrastructure. And the safe and reliable delivery of electric service is fundamental to that infrastructure. As last week's storms proved, National Grid and the members of Local 310 worked tirelessly to provide the people of Rhode Island with the safest and most reliable system in the Northeast, if not the country. This reliability is an asset that the state should value, not to look to diminish. In closing, I would like to say that I understand more than anyone here how easy it is to be upset with National Grid at times. And it is easy to see why they are a target for reducing municipal spending. But there is a reason why both the company and the union stand here together in opposition to Bill H7366. It's a bad bill, and I respectfully ask that you consider my testimony when you vote on it. Any questions?
Any questions for the witness? Yes, Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, your Local 310, do all of your members work for National Grid?
No.
Local
310 represents members of National Grid, Dominion Power Company, which is a generating plant, and also Amera Energy, which is another power plant in Tiverton.
Do any of your members work for the company that that Jeff, I think you said Siemens, is that the name of it? Are you familiar with that group?
I'm familiar with the group, but I don't believe any of them are contractors under National Grid.
And I think Jeff said that they were union workers, but I don't know.
They might be, not with my union, they might be affiliated with IBEW, but they're not part of the BUW.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Kath.
Just your experience on a bucket truck. And you got stabilizers on your trucks. They're big units.
Just to pause you for a quick second, I can speak better to the underground. I actually work in the underground. Okay. So I can try to answer that for you, but
well, just here say you've probably been up in a bucket truck. I'd assume, and you were trained
many times.
And so, have you been up in the windy situation to say
yes.
You were like at like a streetlight level, or even just moving up or above? Would you bounce down sometimes? I'm just trying to get the feel of the zone of protection somebody would have.
The whole time a bucket truck is in the air. Every time you move to do something, you reach for something, the bucket is always moving. It's not fixed. It's a boom. It's an arm. So it's always flexing. And the windier it is, even if you're not physically moving around in the bucket is still moving on its own. So yes.
And the distance from the streetlight to the high tension wires, or the electric wires on the top, what would you say that distance is?
I can't say for certain. There's a construction standard that the company is supposed to adhere to as far as when the guys go out and build the lines, but to copy what Frank said, it might be roughly 4 feet.
All right, thank you.
But I can't give a specific number.
I believe you, since you're the person who's been out there and has done that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions of this witness? I see Jeff raising his hand in the background. Do you have something to add to that testimony, Mr. Broadhead?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. First of all, on the much of Providence does have underground wires. We apologize. What we did was, in working with National Grid during the development legislation and during the Public Utilities Commission, unless there is an entire separate conduit underground just for the streetlight wiring, we'll be calling grids workers in. Problem that's a wiring problem where it's underground wiring. So that's not something that our PRISM's contractors will work directly. So we understand that question. We understand the safety issue there. It is Siemens does use Local 99, which is the IBEW. Okay, I think is that on now? 3 people have turned it on. So
Get close. We need the bucket truck.
Okay. And as far as the location of the lights, most of the lights are, as has been said, about 4 feet down. What PRISM is doing is the first stage when we work with a community, we do the cost benefit, then we do what's called a field audit, where we send people that we have trained out in the field to look. They don't climb up on bucket trucks, they stay in their car, but one of the things they look at are the height of the mast arm, which we need to know to design the LEDs, but also, is it especially close to any of the wiring? And if it is, that light is flagged, and then one of our electricians will go out to assess whether we can work on that pole or not. There are a few lights that are up past the secondary system. They shouldn't be there, but they are. We would not work on that pole. We would call National Grid, and we would pay what's called a facility service charge. It's like $136 extra in order to have Grid come up to work there. So I believe, to the best of our ability, we're aware of the safety, and we know where we should go and shouldn't go. But the lights are supposed to be about 4 feet down. They just all aren't. So I hope that helps on the safety issue.
Any further questions? Thank you. That concludes testimony on House Bill 7366. Do I hear a motion to hold all bills for the study?
So moved. Seconded.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The remaining 2 bills, House Bill 7367 and House Bill 7472, have both, at the request of the sponsors, been continued to the next available date on this calendar. So hearing that and seeing that, that concludes our calendar. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Have a great vacation, everybody.